And what is the latest on Dak Prescott as we work our way towards the beginning of the franchise tag period?
Greeny, I think Dak is playing this perfectly because what he's telling us is he wants to play in Dallas. Now, we've had this standstill between both camps. This contract extension he's been waiting for has not arrived. But Dak is saying, I want to be here. So if I'm not, that's on the front office. Now, he might only play here 1 year. But even so, I think that's smart. Gamble on yourself. He's done it before. If he signs the franchise tag, I think he can win the Kirk Cousins way. Let me ask you guys, who has made more money over the last 5 seasons than Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and any other player in the NFL? It's Kirk Cousins. So I think Dak will be just fine, even if he has to sign the franchise tag. Bet on yourself and then get a payday later.
That's what Jeff Saturday always says. Kirk Cousins them to death. But there's another way this could go. And again, Mike Tannenbaum he's got these ideas, and they always turn out to be right. And we talked in our meeting this morning about how Jerry Jones finds himself in the very unique circumstance for him of not having any leverage in this circumstance. So what's one way he could rectify this situation?
You know, Greeny, they could get him signed and they could trade him straight up for Deshaun Watson. It's player for player, and it solves one problem for one team and another for Dallas. And when you think about where we are, Jerry Jones has made a $40 to $50 million mistake, Greeny. 2 years ago, it would have been about $32 to $33 million a year for Dak Prescott. Now that number is going to be closer to $40 million. On 5 or 6 years, that's about a $50 million mistake. Kimberly's right. Kirk Cousins is a great example. Dak's going to do even better. So one way for Jerry Jones, who's in a very unique position of not having leverage, trade him for Deshaun Watson, get a player who's slightly better under contract for 5 years.
I'm looking at the expression on the face of Bart Scott, and I can't wait to hear what it means. What do you think, Bart?
Why in the hell would Dak Prescott do a sign and trade to go to Houston when he's seeing the dysfunction going on there? Why would I sign up for that long term? Listen, Dak Prescott is close to his free agency, being able to pick where he wants to go. That's what every player covets, the ability to pick the team that you want to play for. Now, if he has to run it back in Dallas, he has all the leverage in the world. Either you give me what I want or you can't franchise tag me after this year, and I'm going to pick my destination. And I'm going to pick a destination where a team that's ready to win, whether it's the San Francisco 49ers that we know don't love Jimmy G, you know, whether it's the Pittsburgh Steelers of the future, if this is Ben's last year. If I'm Dak Prescott, I'm sitting pretty. Pay me my money, and whether you pay me my money, when you pay me my money, I'm going to decide where I'm going to go in the future. You're not going to dictate to me, because if you wanted to dictate to me that I was going to be here long term and say, hey, I'm a Cowboy for life, or at least for the next 5 to 10 years, then you should have paid me my money when I was cheap. He's been underpaid. He was a 4th-round draft pick. They've been making money off him, signing everybody, signing Zeke. Well, tell you what, let Zeke run the ball. Let Zeke throw the ball, but I'm out after this year because, listen, the window is closing in Dallas.
To be clear, they could franchise him a 3rd year, but there's no way they will. It would cost them over $50 million. To assure themselves, the Cowboys, of having Dak the next 2 years would cost them $90 million. It's not an option. So, Mike T., going back to you, whether it is Deshaun, which obviously is something of a pipe dream or not, they are in a position where a sign and trade of some sort with Dak is probably their best option. Is that right?
No question about it. It's the way to cut their losses, because in a year, Greeny, as you just mentioned, he's going to graduate a free agency, and they're going to get nothing but a compensatory pick, much the way Washington did with Kirk Cousins. So you're 100% right. Even if it's not Deshaun Watson, a sign and trade gives them their best chance to cut their losses.
And Kimberly, just to sort of finish it up with the mention of Deshaun Watson, and we'll do more on him, obviously, as we go, but there's a level of toxicity, right, there's a radioactive quality around that franchise right now. Is that correct? From the people you talk to around the league, there's nobody who right now is going to willingly say, yeah, that's the place I want to go next.
Unless you're David Culley or Nick Caserio. No, people want to get out of there, because what we've seen is them not know how to handle or pay top name, high caliber guys. When you talk about DeAndre Hopkins, you know, the stars aren't taken care of. They're clearly there, what they want to see, a franchise that's moving in the right direction. They're not guaranteed that in Houston. To Bart's point, you know, why would anybody like Dak want to choose Houston? There's a lot of issues there.
I think it could be described as a mass exodus from Houston right now. We'll get to one of their superstars who is out the door in just a moment. But you mentioned the Steelers. Let's get to them because they may be next in line in this quarterback carousel. The big decisions there are coming quickly. And speaking of life coming at you quickly, remember when they were 11-0? That feels like about 20 minutes ago. But boy, has everything changed since then. They won just one more game. You saw them lose in the wild card round. So that's over, and it leads to questions about Big Ben Roethlisberger, who will enter this his age 39 season, due over $41 million against the cap. And with Marquise Pouncey now retiring, a change in the offensive coaching staff. The Steelers' offensive line figures to look totally different as well next season. Those two guys were great friends. You see the image of them crying together on the bench at the end of their playoff loss last year. You cannot overstate the impact that Marquise Pouncey has had in Pittsburgh. Since 2017, you see the numbers. He's won nearly 95% of his pass blocks, which is good for third best among centers. There's that side of it, and then there's the leadership and all that side of this as well here. And Kimberly, you were there. You were at that game where they lost to Cleveland and their season was over, and the two of them sat there, Ben and Marquise Pouncey. You can't overstate how close they are. How important is the retirement of Pouncey here to Ben's future?
It's huge. There was a thought if Pouncey comes back, that would almost assure, like, okay, Ben's definitely going to come back, because why would he want to break in a new center? Why would he want to deal with a flux on the offensive line? And here we are. Now he has to. Ben, if you watch that clip of them talking, he said, I feel so bad for you, talking to Pouncey, like, I want to do this for you, brother. Like, they're so tight. This puts the Steelers in an interesting position, because we figured Ben would have played another year. Okay. But now there's a lot of change. Now you've got questions about the offensive line. Ben's play deteriorated as the season went on. There's a case to be made, if you take a step back, that the Steelers might be better off pushing up the rebuild plan and rebuild as far as finding the new QB, finding the new face of the franchise. Is that a draft pick? Do they draft a guy in the first round? Do they pick somebody in the second round that they like? Do they, the QB carousel that we're going to see this offseason, are the Steelers a part of that? That's the interesting thing, because Ben wants to play, but do the Steelers want Ben to play for them?
That is perfectly framed, and that is something that is probably coming to the fore reasonably quickly. And Mike Tannenbaum, I'm going to give you credit. That's what I meant at the beginning of the show. You said last summer, he said it, and everybody mercilessly pounded Mike Tannenbaum when you said the Steelers will have the fourth best quarterback situation in the division this year. And when they were 11-0, the whole world was piling on Mike Tannenbaum. But right now, Mike T, you were laughing last. You take no pleasure in this. I don't mean it that way, but you were right. So as you look at the situation, if you're in charge of this franchise, what are you doing about the quarterback?
Well, Greeny, it's significant about this Marquise Pouncey news. They played 7,500 snaps together, and Marquise Pouncey was a problem solver. And I'm not saying that this is going to push Ben over the line to retirement, but make no mistake about it, it's pushing him towards that line, because he knows how hard it is to win without a productive veteran center who could solve problems. So if I'm Pittsburgh, I agree with Kimberly. I want to probably speed up this process. I probably can't win with this group this year. I'm far behind Cleveland, Baltimore. When you look at what's going on in this division, it's literally, it's changing overnight. And oh, by the way, Cincinnati has Joe Burrow. So if I'm Pittsburgh and I'm Ben, maybe this is the right time to pull a J.J. Watt, have a mutual parting, and move on, because no doubt about it, Pouncey is a significant step in that direction.
I mean, Rob Ninkovich gets up with us early this morning as well. Ninko, what do you think from the players' side of this? How do you see this from Ben's perspective?
Really, really good offensive players.
That's a tough loss to digest from the Browns in the playoffs, and I think that he'll play next year. When you're a football player, you're with your teammates all season long. You talk during practice, you talk during training camp, and you might say, "Hey, man, this is my last run. This is the last one." So when they're sitting on that bench and they're both crying together, maybe they had those talks during the season, and Ben understood that this was going to be his last game with Pouncey, because as a player throughout the season, there's a lot of communication amongst the players on, man, I feel terrible right now, and I'm old, and I just don't know how much more I can go. So maybe that's why we saw so much emotion on the bench there, because Ben knew, okay, this is the last game with Pouncey, and Pouncey knew this was his last game playing. But I don't think that Ben's going to retire. I don't think he's going to go out that way, especially after losing the way that they did. I think he'll be back next year.
I think that's what he's going to want. And to Kimberly's point, is that necessarily in the long-term best interest? So, Mike, let me come back to you. You're going to sit and have a mutual parting, if you will. It's one thing for J.J. Watt and the Texans to do that, because J.J. Watt can go sign someplace as a situational pass rusher. Now, there are very few situational quarterbacks in the National Football League. If Ben and the Steelers were to decide to walk away from each other, is there a market out there for him?
Oh, absolutely. When you think about all the teams that need quarterbacks, and let's go back to the Kansas City model, which was a couple years ago. Alex Smith won for today. We drafted Mahomes and developed for tomorrow. So you talk about Chicago, Indy, even teams like New England. Maybe you sign Ben Roethlisberger on a one-year deal and you draft your starter for 2022 in this year's draft. So I think just based on his track record, he's a lot better than some of these teams' current quarterback situations. So it could be a win-win where Ben gets a fresh start for a year like Phillip Rivers, and then Pittsburgh, as Kimberly said, moves up their rebuild plan, and they take their starter in this year's draft.
That's a really interesting proposition. I see Ben Roethlisberger quarterbacking the New England Patriots next year. We'll get to New England a little bit later. Meanwhile, Kimberly, let's run the hurry up through a few other situations